I've always held a grudge against what people consider art. More often than not, art is pretentious. Art lacks context. Art assumes a certain level of intelligence is needed to grasp what it truly means. Shadow of the Colossus is a piece of art, but it's unlike any of the descriptions I mentioned just now. I had always been aware of its classic status. I knew how many people loved it. Never did I anticipate it to become one of my favorite games of all time. Shadow of the Colossus marked the first release I played this year, but ended up as the adventure I'd remember most vividly. It was on the 24th of January, in one of the earliest weeks of 2018, when I received my code for the game. I had never played the original on PS2, nor the remaster on PlayStation 3, so now was the perfect opportunity to find out what the talk was all about. I went in not knowing what to expect. Sure, I had my assumptions, unavoidably formed by 20 years of playing games before. However, these assumptions could not have been more wrong. Shadow of the Colossus is everything you don't expect it to be. An open world game, but without dozens of objectives and other icons to clear. The most epic boss fights, but without the fast-paced gameplay and quick reaction times usually paired with it. A poetic story that provides the context you need, yet leaves plenty of room for your own imagination. Shadow of the Colossus is a one-of-a-kind experience, a game that breathes atmosphere, a world I got so immersed in and genuinely feel a part of every time I dive back into it. Conversations will be had whether a remake of an old game should even be in the running for an award like this in the major shows, and I think the answer is simply no. For everyone individually though, Game of the Year is nothing more than a personal choice. While I struggled answering the very same question for myself, I came to realize there wasn't any other option. I would be lying to myself, not calling Shadow of the Colossus my Game of the Year of 2018. Closely correlated with art is ambiguity, and I tend to hate ambiguous stories. I like my games as linear as they get, to be served a story written by a single person with one clear vision. I say this because ambiguity often feels cheap to me. 2 years ago I played Inside, a critically acclaimed game that I loved as much as everyone else, apart from the one thing that most people talked about. I was initially blown away by the surprising plot twist, until I reached the end and couldn't help but feel left with the question, but why? What just actually happened? Do the developers even have an idea themselves? I may be alone in this, but I feel ambiguous stories are often created to either provide these shocking twists, yet therefore aren't required to make sense, or as an excuse for not having to come up with an actual deep storyline. This is exactly what worried me going into Shadow of the Colossus. The game begins with a long opening cutscene that ultimately tells you little. On his horse, a stranger named Wanda enters a forbidden land. He carries with him the dead body of a girl. Whether this is his girlfriend, sister or acquaintance is never explained, but it becomes clear Wanda feels committed to find a way to revive her. Locked up in the massive tower at the center of the map is a spirit named Dorman, who promises you it can bring the girl back alive. In order to do this, Dorman asks you to defeat 16 Colossi spread across the world. For what purpose, however, remains unclear. The story of Shadow of the Colossus is minimal. Essentially, there's an opening part, which I just summarized, and a final sequence that closes off the story. Everything that happens in between is driven almost exclusively by gameplay, leaving all the same questions open for you to speculate about along the way. Fortunately, this is where I was happy to see the game do what I was afraid it would not. By the end of the story, the biggest questions are ultimately answered. The conclusion satisfied me, while still leaving plenty up for interpretation. The result is that I had many interesting sessions reading up on theories online, while still feeling confident about understanding the majority of what I needed to know for a sense of closure. But in the end, Shadow of the Colossus is not so much a game about the destination, it's about the journey towards that end goal. I know I throw the word around too often, but more than anything, this really is a game you play for the experience. Looking at it from the most basic perspective, Shadow of the Colossus is an incredibly simple game. On one hand, the gameplay consists of small sections riding through the world on your horse, and on the other, the battles with these enormously large colossi. It's a very welcome shift from the typical standards we're so used to nowadays. How many games can you think of that will completely cut all the fat and put only the necessary elements at the core? There are no regular enemies, there are no side objectives, and there are no upgrades apart from your stamina and health bar that will slightly increase over time. To be truly immersed in a setting is a feeling far from easy to provide. Nailing the atmosphere is so important, and Shadow of the Colossus once again shows why. There is something about this world I find so intriguing that I have a hard time putting it into words. It's silent, mysterious, scary, lonely, yet beautiful, and evokes so many different emotions all at the same time. Excuse me for getting a bit sidetracked, but as a longtime fan of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, one scene had been forever engraved in my mind. In the third movie, Gandalf repels the Nazgul as the camera tracks him from the side, ending on this beautiful shot of Minas Tirith in the background. It suddenly dawned on me while playing the game that same cinematic angle represents the camera work found in here. So many games nowadays require an excuse for you to spend time discovering new areas in the form of collectibles or random side quests. Shadow of the Colossus world is a world I wanted to explore, that I loved simply being a part of. Absolutely spectacular are the 16 boss fights which form the main challenge that is offered in the game. These colossi are gigantic and left me incredibly impressed by their scale alone. From the first time I jumped on the large bird and fought it as it flew through the sky, to the serpent chasing me around through sand as I tried to shake it loose. Moments like these blew my mind. The original version was infamous for its low frame rate, and playing the game now, I fully understand why. To think a PS2 game was able to handle an experience of this scope is a thought I find hard to even fathom. But what surprised me the most is that these boss fights aren't always frantic. You don't dodge their every move, your bow doesn't do any substantial damage, and you don't slash into them to take them down. The colossi require the exact opposite to be defeated, by which I mean patience and thought. I expected heavy action, only now do I understand that calling this a puzzle game is a description I can just as well get behind. The difficulty ramps naturally as you progress from one boss to the next. The very first encounter is easy and requires you to do little more than climb on the Colossus' back and strike its head. Slowly but surely, new mechanics are introduced, whether it is to take out your bow to target weak spots or use the environment in clever ways. Saying anything more about the Colossi is already revealing too much, and I want to preserve you from being robbed of the same experience that I myself had. So much depth to this story is buried within the soundtrack. My favorite song is the one that plays every time a Colossus is defeated. What starts with a victorious, bombastic melody as you find a way to climb on its back, ends in a saddening, hopeless theme. It intentionally gives off the impression that you're congratulated with a sarcastic undertone for killing something beautiful that didn't deserve no harm. Shadow of the Colossus may have the best musical score of any game I've ever played. The entire year I would put it on at the most random moments just to be transported back and relive my memories. When I decide upon my game of the year, I always try to look for ways in which a game has raised the bar. In this regard, there was obviously some heavy competition. I loved God of War. It turned the fundamentals of an established series around, yet somehow managed to come out even better. Red Dead Redemption 2 gave us the most dynamic world yet, with a level of detail that I had never seen before. Now, a game from 2005 obviously cannot hold a candle to these accomplishments, but that's not to say this remake isn't revolutionary in its own right. If you'd ask me, Bluepoint Games has set a new golden standard for upcoming reimaginations now to match. The clear time and effort that was put into this remake to take a classic game and mold it into a modernized form while staying true to the original, I can only commend them for. The graphics are nothing less than astonishing, from the colorful environments to the lighting systems and the skyboxes that have never looked so good. The performance mode on PS4 Pro offers 60 frames per second gameplay that's consistent throughout and made this another case where I just couldn't go back anymore. From now on, this is how a remake is done, and if it was up to me, I would no longer settle for anything less. During the entire course of the game, never once could I detect something that told me the game I was playing came out a long time ago. That being said, staying true to the original also means that the gameplay is generally the same. I've seen some people complain about supposedly clunky controls that impacted their enjoyment. Sure, putting the camera far back is a stylistic choice that will result in some issues, and they show. Apart from that, I personally disagree with the notion. You know, in my first playthrough I did find the game frustrating at times. My horse would often stumble into a set of rocks, and the animations of Wander himself are very specific, they take a long time to get familiar with. Comparing this game to any other in the genre feels similar to comparing a game like Rayman Legends to the Mario series. No, it doesn't play as tight and precise, but it's not intended to be. The animations are floaty, though not necessarily inferior. Now, because the game puts such a large emphasis on trial and error, by which I mean finding ways to beat a boss, it is true, you'll likely get annoyed every once in a while. From personal experience though, the more I played the game, the more I mastered the controls. It's gotten to the point where honestly, going through it now is a breeze, and my last playthrough took me less than a few hours, including all cutscenes. This is a game I played and replayed for its gameplay. Despite the novelty wearing off once you know how each boss is defeated, I'm almost ashamed to admit I finished Shadow of the Colossus a total of 6 times. Overall, this is one of, if not the most impressive remake I've ever played. From Metal Gear HD to the Nathan Drake collection and now this, Bluepoint Games is slowly becoming one of my favorite developers, and I cannot wait to see what they do next. I guess that really shows the true achievement here. A remake of a game over 13 years old left a bigger mark on me than any new release could do this year. If that doesn't prove Shadow of the Colossus deserves to be called my game of the year, I don't know what else does. It's one of the most simple games in essence, yet so full of emotion. I've literally gotten shivers sharing a moment together with Aggro in a deserted open field, just as I did hearing Wander scream its name in desperation as a massive creature was about to strike him down. Shadow of the Colossus is a game you need to experience. I am so glad that I can say I did so now. Thanks everybody for watching this video on my Game of the Year 2018, I really hope you enjoyed it. I've recently once again been trying to put out as many of these high quality in-depth videos as I can, but understand that it's only with the help of your support that I can continue doing so. If you've enjoyed all the stuff I've been putting out over the last couple of weeks, then please consider heading over to patreon.com/RobinGaming, where you can help me out and support me with any amount that you would personally like. In return, you'll get some really cool rewards. For example, early access to videos like these. You'll show up with your name in the credits like all the people next to me, as well as a Q&A video that I do each month where I answer all your personal questions. The next one is actually coming up in a couple of days from now. So with that being said, I'd like to thank you a lot for that. Let me know what your opinion on Shadow of the Colossus is and whether you've actually played it. Let me know what your own game of the year would be in the comments, of course. And then for now, again, I'd like to thank you a lot for watching and hope to see you again next time.